Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Cara.
I don't want you to feel outnumbered in this episode.
I feel a little bit outnumbered in this episode. I'm not going to lie.
There might be 2 clean freaks in this episode and one. Well, I mean, you're a clean person. You're just not a tidy freak.
I'm clean and I'm neat, but I am not at the level of you and today's guest.
Right. And by the way, this isn't a scale of like from low to high being from good to bad, bad to good, or good to bad. It's just a scale. And our guest, Tyler Moore, sits squarely on one end with me, and you are somewhere else on the scale, but you are not very far down the other end because we cover that end too. So Tyler Moore is also known as the Tidy Dad. He is the author of a new book called Tidy Up Your Life. And he, while juggling a career as a middle school teacher and raising 3 girls and living in a 750 square foot apartment that has gone viral many times on social media, down to his 14-inch wide closet, Tyler managed to write this really practical, but also really lovely and warm book.
Tidy Up Your Life is so vulnerable and honest and real about how tidiness and mess are all part of the human experience. And they're not just about the surface, but they're also about what's underneath and the baggage we bring and how we can clean it up or make peace with it. So enjoy this awesome episode. Hi, Tyler. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So, those of you who watched us on the Drew Barrymore show the first time might recognize Tyler from his cameo as an audience member asking us an awesome question. So this is not the first time we have hung out with Tyler. Unfortunately, Drew couldn't make this recording, but she sends her best.
Oh, no, I know. That's what I was about to say during that initial pause. I was like, this isn't the first time. Last time it was the national TV audience, and then you guys were whisked away. And then I had the strangest, most beautiful experience with Drew. Like, you guys were off the stage, and for the next hour, because her tapings, they're sort of like fluid, and they sort of just go on and on.
Oh yeah.
But there was a moment where she asked me to give advice to this newly expectant couple in the audience. Oh. And she was holding my hand, and I gave her basically the synopsis of Tidy Up Your Life, which at the time still wasn't finished. And she fainted on the ground, and then her dog ran up and jumped in my lap, and I was like, what is this moment, and what is happening You're now?
No one wake me up from this dream. It's too good.
It was so strange. And then the morning of, because we have the same editor, which I learned that day, because I told Marnie that I was like, I'm not going to be able to get you edits this afternoon because I'm going to the Drew Barrymore show. And she was like, my authors are going to be on today. And I was like, what a strange sort of serendipitous circle of events sometimes that we never could have planned. It's strange.
It's very tidy.
Yes.
It's very tidy. Yeah.
Yes.
No clutter there.
So Tyler, when I told Cara that you would be coming on the podcast, her excitement levels hit about a 79 out of 10.
Yes.
Wow.
Because you sit by me, Tyler. Clutter and Cara do not go together very well. I can tolerate it, but
sort of
in many people. What I love about the way you approach this topic, whether on social media or in your book, is that you don't judge people. You simply share your love of this strategy, and you put words to how I feel about uncluttering and having everything have a space and a place that people who think otherwise sometimes judge me, us, and you have helped, I think, disavow them of that judgment. Right? It's
I appreciate you saying
thing.
that, because there's the questions of everyone is so quick now to give a diagnosis, that they're like, oh, you must just have like OCD. Like you can't, I just did this interview with the Telegraph in the UK. And for some reason they used the subheading of that I have this like pathological fear of mess.
I can't believe it was the subhead and not the header.
I know. But it's like, why do we automatically jump to these like labels that sometimes have either medical or sort of like clinical diagnoses, when the reality is I'm like a dad who enjoys tidying things because it then frees up the mental space so that I can do the things that I need to do. Life is messy enough, not factoring in not being able to find your stuff.
And we're going to get there, because this is something that I have told my children for 21 years. And you have a way of getting that message across that I don't. So I'm very excited to be in conversation. But maybe we start at the beginning. Like, tell us, how did you land here? How did your growing up journey land you at Tidy Dad?
Yeah, well, I had that classic story of, like in adolescence, my parents divorced. And so there really were two sort of phases of life. There was like everything that I knew up until the divorce, and then everything after the divorce. And everything after the divorce, really, I just wanted to project to everyone that everything was okay. Because growing up in a deeply religious and conservative town in Kentucky, being a child of divorce, it was like a scarlet letter. And so the way to no longer have that scarlet letter is just to project that you're like funny and smart and outgoing, because if you can just get everyone to not pay attention to that scarlet letter, you're somehow winning. And you will know from your work that like when things happen at the age 13 or 14, especially when you think about family structure, that forever sort of changes your outlook and viewpoint. And so for years, I tried to project to everyone that my life was tidy, until I had 2 young kids, a career that was sort of like spiraling out of control, and I no longer had strategies to keep things outwardly tidy. And so that's when I sort of broke and then tried to find that breakthrough to sort of deal with the mess.
Yeah. I mean, Tyler, the vulnerability, people might not expect it when they look at the book and when they think about what it's about, ways to, quote, tidy up your life. But it's not just about the objects. It's not just about the superficial stuff. The way you frame decluttering, tidying, creating order out of chaos is about doing the work inside of ourselves, not just doing the superficial work. And it ties so beautifully to something we think about and talk about all the time, which is leaving your baggage at the door and sort of knowing, what are you bringing into this experience? What are you bringing into a partnership with your spouse? What are you bringing into your parenting? What are you bringing into physically a space and your relationship to space and routine and all of those things? And it's really beautiful how vulnerable you make yourself as part of making the case for why thinking about these things really matters and really makes a difference. Your other role besides Tidy Dad is as a middle school teacher, which, we believe that middle school teachers deserve a special place in heaven, in the world to come, because you are doing the most incredible work. And I want to understand how that part of your work, so we know your personal backstory, your professional life, how does that help you, give you insight and empathy for what people are grappling with? I mean, there's no one with less executive functioning, that's like triple negative, than a group of middle schoolers, right? That's for like rock bottom, because they're both independent and incapable. How do you, not all of them, sorry, if someone's listening and they're like, not my child. How has that given you insight and empathy for people's kind of grappling with creating tidiness?
Yeah, well, I think any given school year, I'm always responsible for between 20 to upwards of like 32 students at the same time, plus a co-teacher, because I've been in a co-taught special education classroom for almost 15 out of my 17 years, while also navigating paras and parents. And it's so many different dynamics and ways in which people think. And I have the students who are like intuitively motivated and intuitively sort of have their systems at play. But then I have other students who it's like they're literally the walking tornadoes and they never know where their math book is. But yet, it's my job to find ways to either build relationships or build connections or break down sort of the tidy skills into manageable parts. And I've learned that one strategy does not fit all, that often there's this like metacognitive approach that it takes, but also a lot of it with my kids is I have to build within them this why behind, like, why is Mr. Moore so like, why is he always harping on us about the organization and aesthetics of our notebook? Why is he always saying, like, use the hand signals. Don't raise your hand to ask me to go to the bathroom. Why is he like, I always organize things into quadrants where it's like quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4, so that strategically there's this flow throughout the room. But it comes from, I cannot hold all the information in for that classroom. If I am the one who is solely responsible for knowing where everybody's book is, I can't actually get to the more important work that my principal always wants me to take on. And even today, I learned as soon as I got to school that the district people, there are always those district people who are like walking through, and the principal even called me. She'd already spoken to me. And then she called me again and she was like, I just have to make sure that you're doing your thing today. And I'm like, yes,
I do my thing every day.
I'm like, I don't know what the alternative is, but like, I'm in the thick of it. I'm with children all day long and adults trying to navigate spaces, which is different from, it's not to discount work that professional organizers do, but like, I'm not a professional organizer, but yet I'm thinking about organization in a different way.
And it's such a gift, right? I mean, each of us have had jobs, and this goes for everyone who's listening, everyone who's ever been employed anywhere. You get a paradigm, a frame, a lens through which you see the world based upon that job or that series of jobs. And I think the job of educator and the job of pediatrician provides a very similar lens. The way that we see kids and families and how people solve problems is very similar because it has to be 30,000 foot. It has to be holistic. And then we put on our parent hat, and we'll go there in a second. We put on our parent hat. It's totally different. And yet the gift, the personal gift that you got is you've had almost 2 decades of teaching experience. You get to take those hundreds and hundreds of kids who have informed you, and you get to apply all of that knowledge to your own home space. And I felt this way in pediatrics. And I think Vanessa felt this way. I don't want to say how you felt, Vanessa, but we've had conversations over the years with Dynamo Girl and understanding kid psychology around sports and then personal empowerment. And it's all kind of the same gift. And what I love about what you do in this book, and it speaks to what Vanessa was talking about, is it's about being organized and tidy, but it's also about taking someone else's gift, their lens, and being able to apply it to your life. And that makes it really special. I think you do it especially well on social media, frankly, because you're able to do some show and tell that's super fun and relatable.
And I think that, we live in a 750 square foot apartment. I have 3 young daughters. They're 9, 7, and 4. And I'm not inviting people. I don't think that everyone should just live in like a tiny New York City apartment. One, because then my rent would go up because everyone's moving in. But my life is like a mirror for people. Like they see some of the struggles that I have, or the work that I'm doing in my really tiny closet to make things fit, or something
Is
that I'm
that your
experimenting
tiny closet over your
And-
shoulder?
It's funny. That is my wife's large closet. But
Oh, come
I know.
on.
Yes, but mine is, I mean, I can kind of show you. This doesn't work. There's my tiny one. See with the pumpkin? Even though it's January. So mine is 14 inches wide and 6.5 feet tall, and it fits all of the things in my, all of my clothes. But it's funny because my students, even last week, they were like, Mr. Moore, can you please wear a different color? And it was like, what are you talking about? They're like, I know that you have those like colors you always wear. Like it's always blue, green, tan sometimes. This like pinkish color. They're like, can you please get a new one? And I was like, no, because that's my capsule. Like I have 4 core colors. I don't have room. So even the students, they can like troll me. They find it's funny. But like when I explain to them, like, this is why I wear 4 colors and I mix and match, they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
So.
I mean, it does make sense. I'm asking for a friend. What if you're married to someone who is the opposite of you, who never throws anything out, who doesn't see mess, who is like literally like Pigpen incarnated in human, not animated form? What is your advice for my friend about how to be in conversation after, nearly 25 years of marriage and grappling with this dynamic?
No, so what I would tell your friend, so I think one is, I think that you have to identify what you are in control of and what you're not in control of. So like, for example, I am fully in control of my closet. No one should touch it. No one should go in there. And I am completely responsible for all of the organization systems. And sometimes regardless of what the rest of the house looks like, I can open that little closet and I'm like, okay, right here, things feel like right with the world.
So we need a sanctuary.
So I really think that having some sort of sanctuary space, it could be office space, it could be your closet, it could be a place where you store your hobbies. If you have multiple cars, it could be like your car that your spouse, that you are primarily using. It's really identifying like what real estate are you responsible for. Then when it comes to negotiation, you do sort of have to perfect that negotiation around like those decluttering strategies of like what stays, what goes, who's responsible for the system. But I also think for so many people, just curbing the influx of new things helps considerably, because there are people who are just the like recreational shoppers, always bringing stuff in, but also a disorganized space breeds that overconsumption, because when you can't find something, oftentimes instead of looking, it's just easier to go out and buy the new thing.
Tyler, have you always been neat?
It's funny. I've always had, I would say, a leaning towards organization, because I never liked the feeling of not knowing where my stuff was. And even going back to my parents' divorce, like at the age of 13, I mean, I was a pretty lucky divorced kid because my parents, we'd literally just like split the houses. And my mom had a house, my dad had a house. We had this schedule where my sisters and I were 2 days at one parent. Then we had this free day in between where we would choose where to go. And then we would do 2 days at the other one. And it was never this like mom holding it against dad. It was more so because at that point we were all like teenagers. And so it actually in some ways was sort of nice to get away from my sisters and just have like one-on-one time with my dad or one-on-one time with my mom. But I was responsible for knowing where stuff was. And I remember like even school assignments or like projects that if it was due on Friday and I knew that I was going to be at my dad's house on Tuesday, on Wednesday, I had to bring everything with me. So I learned pretty strategically that like organization sort of was, I don't want to say that it was fully the control, but like that was my way to navigate seamlessly back and forth.
Right. And you built the muscle early because you had to. Like you were...
Yeah, there wasn't... I mean, I guess the only choice was to not know where my stuff was. And my sisters were not organized. And there were always fights and disagreements about the sports gear and where stuff was. And I didn't also want to burden my parents. Like, I didn't want them to have to drive across town to get me the things. I never wanted to be like dependent upon other people. So that's why I just knew where my things were and stuck with the systems.
So, Tyler, I'm not asking you to psychoanalyze me, but I'm feeling very seen right now as a kid whose parents got divorced when I was 14. For me, the sort of the stabilizing influence on my life was my highlighter collection. And all of my friends from high school remember not only the vastness of my highlighter collection, but the organization of my highlighter connection. And yet I was not that organized in my closet. My stuff was on the floor. My room was a mess, right? But you could see where it was going.
Yeah.
So writing was on the wall
in highlighter. Oh yes, it was. But you know, I want to take that to kind of in a slightly askew direction, because you talk a lot about your origin story being in two places and spaces. And yet you also talk a lot about the balance of the domestic workload in your home. And yet your most formative experiences, there may not have been really as much balance because there was only one person maybe to shoulder those things. And I'm wondering how those things are connected, because they feel connected to me.
Yeah, it was fascinating to unpack that part of the story of thinking about what was it like to see my parents share responsibilities. And nothing, even when they were married, nothing was ever divided based off of gender. And even when I think about the chore list that my sisters and I had, there wasn't this expectation of like my sisters do one type of thing, I do the other. But then when they divorced, I remember just feeling this empathy for them, even as a teenager, very egocentric. Like, I remember feeling empathy for the amount of work that I know that they had to take on, because I was like, they're now, you know, doing the cooking and cleaning, the shuffling back and forth. I remember when they both took on, you know, sort of like second jobs, just because financially to go from that dual income now to single income like that, especially with teenagers, when we're talking about cars and sports and braces, like that was a huge thing. And so I took that into my marriage, because when my wife and I first got married, I was teaching full time. My wife was going to grad school, but she was also working, you know, like part-time / full-time. And I remember we just set this rule of like, okay, whoever gets home first, they're the person that starts cooking. And it was like that, even just establishing that foundation from the start was huge, because I was like, we're both fully capable. And that's what I've always seen, is like my mom and dad were fully capable of caring for the home. And so that's something that I've tried to instill in my own house too.
So Tyler, some of us on this podcast might have 4 children.
So many children, Tyler.
None of whom have achieved an impeccable room ever in their lives. Like, to the point where like the dorm rooms by the middle of the year, not invited up, camp bunk, begged not to come in and see it. That's actually the neatest my children have ever been, is when they're camp counselors have helped them
to clean.
Force them. I'm curious, how do we make space for the way different people inhabit their worlds? What matters to them? Like, for me, I cannot think if I'm in a messy environment. I cannot write if there's music playing. Like, I need quiet, I need order, I need all of that. But I am in a family with people who can only write with music blaring, or can write basically sitting on a pile of like, I don't know, dirty laundry and dog shit. I mean, it's like astounding to me. Not listeners, not literally.
Do you imagine, Vanessa, do you imagine that they would do it better, not in that circumstance? Or do you just try to wrap your brain around how that circumstance is ideal for them?
So it used to infuriate me and just make me lose my mind. And then the more I understood my kids, the more empathy I had for the way my husband operates.
Mhm.
And it was it's a real pick your moment lesson where you figure out when to raise certain issues and how to have conversations. And I've stopped sort of dictating certain things. What I do dictate is they have to have enough workspace. Like they have to have enough space on their desk to have all of the items. And so I'll go in and I'll sort of like help them get their desk in order, throw out old like Gatorade bottles and gum wrapper. Like I will help them. And what they say to me is like, how do you do that so quickly? Like my brain doesn't work that way. So I guess, Tyler, I'd love for you to speak to making room for the diversity of people's relationships to mess and how you convince someone, as you say in the book, physical clutter is the manifestation of mental clutter. I like to say tidy desk, tidy mind. How do you compromise and make space for all of that and create order?
Yeah. So one thing that we've had to do is have conversations around like our mess thresholds, because everybody has, like, when you think about messes, like there are obviously the physical messes that you're talking about. There are like messes in the workplace, where you're dealing with like a boss or this like influx of, responsibilities that you have. There's also relational mess where you think about like friendships or extended family members. Like we all have sort of different tolerance levels and different thresholds. And I actually think that we don't talk about mess enough from the standpoint of like what actually triggers sort of that visceral sort of reaction. For some people, it is walking in and seeing stuff all over the floor. For me, I have sort of a visceral reaction to that because when I see my children step on stuff as they're trying to move from one side of the room to the other, that like makes my blood boil. And I actually had to talk to them about it, that I'm like, I don't care about clutter right now on surfaces. All I want is to make sure that stuff is off the floor so that I can like run the robot vacuum and it's not going to suck anything up or break it. And that beginning to talk to them about it, because sometimes they're like, Daddy, you just want everything perfectly put together. And I'm like, actually, no, like, I don't think that that's realistic. It's not realistic for everything to be perfectly tidy. So that threshold is like helped.
But, one thing that's going to be interesting, and I 100% need you to come back on this podcast in about 4 years. I mean, hopefully sooner than that. But like, I'm thinking about when your 9-year-old is 13. And I'm thinking about this very normal developmental phase where kids, in an effort to begin individuation, push back and they find the things that are important to us and they react to it. And I actually think
reject them.
Yes, they do. And so I think it's why I lived a life of cognitive dissonance in high school where I had a highlighter collection that was highly organized and I threw all my clothes on the floor because throwing my clothes on the floor made my mom mad. And it was something I could control. And I see it, to your question, Vanessa, one of my kids is extremely artistic and has always said to me, her organizational skills are connected to her creativity and that it is not messy. It is the way her brain sees things and organizes things. And yet I watch when I say, hey, can you clean your desk? Because I too believe clean desk, clean mind. She will literally take an arm, swoop it across the desk, and whatever drawer is open, everything goes in there. And that really doesn't bother her. And so it's sort of this whole intersection of the way they react to what we want. And often, and this is true in so many corners of parenting, what we know is better for them. What we know is safer and healthier. It is safer to not have Lego on the floor. Like bottom line, it's like a silly example, but ouch, and you slip or you fall or whatever.
The number of times I've stepped on a Lego, it's like the most painful.
It's awful.
It is. So like, so where is, I want to project 3, 4, 5 years down the road. Are your kids going to push back by not being tidy? Or do you have a magic elixir to share that helps people kind of make that clean button not a button kids can push? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think that they will push back. And it's interesting because right now all three share one bedroom. They have a triple bunk, triple wardrobes. If you were to open up each girl's individual wardrobe right now, it is totally like, as much as I fight against that whole birth order thing, but it is 100% like birth order right now. And I say that even as a middle child, but I was like a special sort of middle child. But to your point, I think that in a home, I think that just like in a workplace, there are those like shared spaces. To me, there needs to be this mutual respect around shared spaces. So you naming for your family what that is, be it the living room, be it the kitchen, whatever it may be. I do think there is something to giving kids choice. And like right now in the girls' wardrobes, they have these little like joy shelves where they can put whatever trinkets and treasures they want. Two of the girls, it's a hot mess. One of my daughters, it's like perfectly placed and put together. But like those shelves are not mine. Like I leave it. I leave their bunks. My youngest has stuff all in it. And right now I'm like, it's your bed, you do you, because I have my own bed. But there are places, even like the kitchen has to be clean.
Yeah,
the
I'm
bathroom,
so with you.
The bathroom has to be clean. But my point around shared spaces is like when we prepare our children to be sent off into the world, they can't show up at a workplace and their boss say, by the way, your desk is a complete mess. And them to say, well, that's how I like it. Like you can't, that's not acceptable. Even
and
classroom.
And their boss will judge them. Right?
100%.
And their teacher will judge them.
Yes. And even when you think about like, there are norms around like aesthetics physically and cleanliness, that there are certain societal expectations that I think that are important, but yet there are then other things that I think that it's okay to just sort of like let go. And sometimes it's letting it go for a particular season, which is difficult. I mean, like it is hard sometimes when I walk through our playroom and I'm like, stuff is literally everywhere. But yet I remember that day when I was home from school and all three of my daughters were at school. And I had this moment of like, oh my gosh, that phase of having a child home and playing is now over. It's gone. That sort of like noise and mess. It's just time goes so quickly. And so I do feel like, I think that it's when that like shared spaces versus not, but also knowing just for hygiene and health. Like you have to have a clean toilet. You have to have a clean sink. You have to clean the hair out of the bathtub, like, or else there are problems that happen. So I do think that is, I don't know. I don't know if that's the magic elixir, but like at least talking about shared spaces is applicable beyond the home.
So Tyler, funny you should bring up the bathroom because your family shares one bathroom. And I won't ruin all of your secrets that are in the book about how to have a family of 5, 3 daughters, the nail polish, share a bathroom. But I want to bring up something that I'm sure you've thought about and a question we get asked all the time from another angle, which is how do you address privacy now? How are you thinking about privacy in the future? You have 3 daughters of 3 different ages. They share a room, you share a bathroom. Yeah. What are you thinking through on that front?
So it's funny because it was similar to the question that I got to ask you all on Drew Barrymore. And I do continue to think about something that you all mentioned, which was that sort of what's normal to one family doesn't necessarily have to be normal to another. And there are sort of those like norms and routines and habits that sort of form. Like my daughters, apart from, we have a cottage in Pennsylvania and that has 2 bathrooms. And I remember a couple of years ago, my youngest daughter was like, Mabel has her own bathroom. Matilda has her own. Why don't I get my own bathroom? And I was like, we're not building you, little 4-year-old, your own bathroom.
Sounds like a third born.
Yes. But what's interesting? I feel like the one bathroom is all the girls have known so far. And there is some strategic negotiation that has to happen. But also, I don't know. I just feel like growing up, it's funny because I've tried to think about what happened in my own family. And I think that lots of people think that. And I don't have any memories of the like body conversations that happened between my sisters and I. At some point, there was privacy, but I don't remember
Right.
when it happened. And so I don't know if it's silly to just say, we'll figure that out when it comes, because I don't know what the alternative is. Is the alternative that we leave the apartment we're currently in, move to another apartment, which you guys know in New York City, the rent then skyrockets. Like, we're sort of always negotiating that like cost analysis of like, is it worth it? And I feel like we'll confront it when we have to.
I will say that my kids went to an elementary school where a parent asked at one of the coffees with the head of school, my kids share a bathroom, and I'm wondering what you think as someone who knows kids and understands the need for privacy, yada, yada, yada. And he said, may sharing a bathroom be the biggest challenge in your child's life. There are so many amazing lessons learned, as you said, navigating, negotiating, using words to explain what your needs are, understanding the human body, right? Like there's
knocking
so
on a door.
many, knocking on it, closing a door, right? I mean, there are so many pieces to it. When something is your mess to clean, when someone else has a mess to clean and you can help. I mean, there are just so many places where that lesson is so deeply, deeply valuable. And flash forward many, many years, we have a neighbor who lives just up the street from us, and they have a house with multiple bedrooms, and their 3 daughters have always slept in the same bedroom. And it started when they were young. They were born very closely together, but the girls never wanted to leave that setup. The oldest one went to college this year. She still has space in that bedroom. That is the bedroom she will come back to when she comes home from college. And there are just a lot of very interesting ways to raise kids and to occupy space. And there are a lot of beautiful lessons that can be learned.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about being in relationship to other people. I mean, ultimately, Tyler, that's what your book is about. It's about bringing yourself to a relationship, communicating with the people with whom you share space and work and meaning and love, and kind of figuring out, as you all change and evolve, how to continue to be in shared space together. And it's a really, you can see my friend is obviously still grappling with this.
Marsha.
But Marsha. But I will say, going back to the earlier point, it is not superficial, because the ways I have learned to communicate with my husband and my children about, mess, clutter, neatness is really a conversation about respect, communication, expectations, both theirs and mine, right? It's actually the core of our relationship gets negotiated through these conversations. And I've gotten better at it, and they've gotten better at it, and they ask for help when they need help. And the one thing I have really learned not to do is to simmer in my resentment. Right. And you talk about not doing it all alone, not carrying it all alone. Can you talk for a minute about how to share the responsibility with not just with your partner, but with your kids, how to bring them along for the ride?
Yeah. So I think that, there's always so much work that goes on within a home. And I think you have some options. One, you can share responsibilities. And that's the classic, like, teacher, I do, we do, you do, which is that gradual release of responsibility. So often as parents, we just expect our kids to know how to do something. And that is not the case. Even if you think about a toddler and just saying, go get on your shoes, there are so many steps to get on your shoes so you can get out the door. There's also the idea of eliminating responsibilities, which is sometimes a choice. It is either dropping the expectation or letting things go, or saying, like I did, I don't want to have to take care of a yard. So I live in New York City. Right. I don't want to commute. So I found a school that's 6 blocks from my apartment. Like, that is, a really helpful strategy. So it's like share responsibilities. Oh, the third is outsource. I almost forgot. Outsource, which is like, are there those like small ways to just pay someone to do something? I have a app that I use that tells me when to water my plants.
I love this. I love this. Tell the story about your mom and Greg.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I was like, I went to my mom's house and I was like, Mom, your plants are looking like so great. And she was like, oh yeah, Greg helped me. And I was like, Mom, who is Greg? And she was like, oh, it's my like little plant app. Like he helped me. He named all the plants. And I was like, what are you talking about? But like, I have my little plant app that tells me when I need to water things. That is eliminating that responsibility, that headache.
I can't keep plants alive. I cannot.
Now
I have to get Greg. I know. Greg.
It's literally $20. Like I thought, I mean, you can't really see it, but I had this olive tree, but look at the little olive branches that are growing back. It told me where in the house to put it.
Oh
so
my
I put
God.
it next to our like radiator pipe. I have my own like Mediterranean eco zone right here because I have the light. I have the radiator pole and then I keep it watered. But that's thanks to Greg.
People who never lived in New York City don't appreciate the radiator and the radiator pole. It's like a very special part.
It's so hot that I'm like, this is the spot where
how you have to open a window when you're
turn off
the
the radiators because your apartment is so hot. Yes.
Yeah, so it's like my life is an exercise of things not being in my control. So I have to consciously sort of center myself because.
But isn't that life?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, it is. And that is like, I feel like the sort of arc of tidy up your life, which is that like, we're all going to experience messes. Messes do not ever go away. There are physical messes. There are mental messes, personal, emotional, but when we were talking about that decluttering strategy, like there are strategies that you can hone by sorting through your stuff. That's a much lower stakes. Like nobody actually cares what you wear unless you're like in the fashion world. But like if you can hone your decision-making abilities with the shirts that you wear, you can then apply it to much more higher stakes messes that you might experience.
Yeah. And I have to say, we're recording this a couple of weeks after the big wildfires in Los Angeles. And I have so many friends who either have lost everything they have or don't have access. Their homes are in places that were badly burned and they can't go back. And there's this citywide recognition of it's just stuff. It's just stuff. And sure, you could argue, then why clean it up if it's just stuff? And it's and we as Americans, we as inhabitants of the earth in 2025, there is a materialism and a connection to things that occupy space that is very real. And what you offer is a way through, okay, well, if you have all this stuff, whether it's modern plumbing in a bathroom that needs to be cleaned or actually tons of toys, manage the stuff, right? You can't just ignore the fact that all of these things are accumulating in the same way that emotionally, as things are accumulating, you can't ignore them, right? It's all part and parcel of the same theory. So let's land here, which is kind of wrapping together all the pieces of your life, right? You teach, you are raising 3 daughters, you're on a book tour, you have a book baby, which is really like a 4th child. How do you balance your own mental load? Clearly, the physicality of tidying up is one of your mental wellness techniques that you employ. But how do you balance all of these different pillars in your life?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. And, we're in this sort of like mini survival season, which is what this book launch has been, of the equal parts just trying to survive and like get food on the table and have everybody where they need to go, but also stepping back and recognizing like this is a beautiful mess of a season. Like launching a book into the world is an incredible gift to have been given. And so I have little like anchor routines that help that like right now I continue to wake up before my children so that I have like a little bit of quiet time. I set my coffee to brew the night before so that it's ready for me in the morning. I get off every day at 2:20, from school. And so my wife sort of does the homework routine while a couple afternoons a week I go for a run. I try to always have a book going that like I'm enjoying, reading again. Cause I know even from your own writing process that like, it was really hard to read other writers' books at the same time that I was writing because I didn't want to get anyone's words in my head. But then there's also the power of trash TV. And like, I'm a huge Bravo fan. And I have watched so many seasons of The Real Housewives, and like being in the New York City scene, I now run in some parties sometimes with the housewives. And so I get to go up to them and talk to them. And I'm like, who am I? Have I arrived? And like no one else cares. But I'm like, but those things, like those anchors, like those do ground me and center me. And it's about making space for what matters. And right now I still know that like my mental health matters in the midst of everything that I'm going through. And so how do I carve out those little bitty pockets of time?
Well, you matter. Your book is wonderful. It's going to help so many people figure out a way to get through the beautiful mess of life. And we're so grateful, Tyler, to have you on. And a shout out to our shared editor, Marnie Cochran, who's a brilliant, hilarious angel of a person and a fabulous editor. So Marnie, thank you for all you do. And Tyler, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. You can email us with questions, feedback, or episode requests at podcast@lessawkward.com.
If you want to learn more about what we do to make this whole stage of life less awkward for everyone involved, our parent membership, our school health ed curriculum, our keynote talks, and more are all at lessawkward.com.
And if you want products that make puberty so much more comfortable, visit myumla.com.